Hey, everybody. I'm Gary Miller. I am a guest host today on Hired the Podcast. Our traditional host, Travis Miller, is usually our host, but he's not here today, and I'm filling in. And with us today, we have Sean Dotson, formerly the president of R&D Automation down in Florida. Sean built a very, very successful company down there that became a juggernaut in the automation and machine building industry. But Sean also happens to be a free agent as of recently, so we're going to probe into a little bit about what that feels like. So let me start with that. But Sean, first, let me say welcome.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it. It's there's been some changes recently in my life, but yeah, interested to talking to you about it all.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about what that feels like. You know, as an executive recruiter, one of my a skill or a talent trait that a good recruiter would have would be empathy. What is it like to be in your shoes? And I've never changed jobs like ever, so I really don't have that experience. But I can imagine it's interesting. So, you're a free agent. You know, you're very well known in the industry. You obviously have talent at building teams, building organizations, in automation, which is one of the hottest markets in the world right now. But the world is your oyster. So I'm curious, as you're forming your vision for what you are going to do next, what's that
hmm
process? How does that feel?
Yeah, it's a lot of emotions. I've owned and or operated R&D now for just close to 18 years. So I had it for 16 years. About 2 years ago, I sold it to a private equity firm. And now, about 2 years later, decided that it was time to move on and look at some other things. It's You go through a range of emotions. Like you said, it's 18 years is a long time. I liken it to raising a child. It's now it's ready to go off to college and be on its own. And I feel like I've done a really good job at building a really good team that's going to take a company and it's going to be my legacy, going forward. Even if I'm not a part of it, it's still going to be part of what I built. I've I'm getting a lot of thought. It's only been a few weeks. Given a lot of thought about what I want to do. I will say the outpouring of um, wonderful comments and just very humbling letters and notes and calls that I've gotten from everybody in the industry is really amazing. I don't think you really realize the impact that you've had on other people or other companies sometimes until people come out and explicitly tell you. So I've really been touched, to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
by a lot of the feedback. So I've decided I'm gonna take a little bit of time, sit back, reflect on what's important to me. I have some key tenets and some key values that are very important to me, which I'm sure we're going to discuss a little bit more later on. But the most important thing to me is finding something that I'm passionate about and something that I'm going to enjoy and something that I can make an effective change. I've still got a lot of miles left in me, and I think I've got a lot, left to give to an organization, to help them grow.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's touch on values then. So you first of all, I will comment the goodwill that you have in the marketplace is an incredible asset that you have. You know, if you
Thank you.
stay in or near the automation business, you'll be a customer magnet more or less, or people will follow you and look into what you're doing just because of who you are, and that's a great testimony. But culture is really an extension. I've heard once that culture is equal to the length and shadow of its leader. And so whatever
hmm
values you have are some of those same values that helped build R&D, and you comment frequently and we hear a lot about its fantastic culture. So what are
hmm
some of those values that you stand for that are paramount and are going to have to be part of a new organization's culture?
Right. You know, I have spoke a lot about culture because I believe that, it's a very cliche thing to say, is that people are your most important assets. And of course, you being in the recruiting field and the human resources field, you know that. You live that every day. There's a lot of companies that'll say that their people are super important to them, but their actions don't always speak that. I think it's really important to make sure that you're always making sure that your people are first and foremost in your company. If you have really good people with a good culture who trust you, who want to work there, who really believe in the mission of the company, profits and revenue will come from that. That's just a natural flow. Um, you know, I've done things at my company over the years. Things like back 18 years ago when we first started, we had the unlimited vacation policy, which a lot of tech companies now in the last 5 6 years have adopted that. We were doing it 18 years ago, and I have a lot of other business owners that look at me, like, are you crazy? Like, how do you manage that? Like, how could you possibly have unlimited vacation? And what I tell them is it's not so much unlimited vacation, it's just the flexibility to do the work when you can, and taking that time off when you really need it. If you've got a sick relative or a sick child or something else going on in your life, forcing somebody to come into work while they're going through that very stressful event is, one, not good for them, and two, they're not giving their all. They're not totally focused on the task at hand. So you might be getting half or quarter productivity out of them. So isn't it better to allow them to take that time off, go deal with that situation that's bothering them, and then come back and get the work done? So I've always been a big believer in, let's set expectations, let's set the task at hand, let's put some due dates and project milestones in this, and then as long as you're hitting those milestones, it really doesn't matter to me if you're working from 8 to 5, right, and clocking in and clocking out. It's never been something that's real important to us. One of the other major tenets too is fit and matching the culture of the company. I'd much rather hire somebody who's a better fit culturally than maybe somebody who is slightly technically better. Now, of course, technical skills are very important in our industry. But if you've got somebody who's just maybe it's a little bit more technical, but they're not a real good fit for the team, I'm going to take the person who's a good fit for the team, and then the team is going to teach them those technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important to us, and there's other things that I think should go without saying, but things like, being ethical, being fair, being respectful of everybody. We can disagree. We had some very heated debates, at our companies over the years about, things down to, should we be using this air cylinder or that air cylinder, or this robot or that robot, all the way up to what is our philosophical mission in the automation world. But those debates are welcome. I want people to debate with me because I want to understand the other side of the argument. Because we're human, we're not always right. So I've gone as far sometimes. I've taken the opposite point of view from what I believe, just to try to see what the other person will push back on. So that was actually a tactic I stole from Steve Jobs from years ago. I read that he would sometimes take the opposite point of view just to inspire debate.
Sure. I want to ask you about fit, because I've read about fit, and depending on how literal you take it, that if you only ever hire people that like match the, perfectly, it's like a love fest that that the team won't grow. That you need somebody that
Sure.
not only fits the team but can enhance the team or advance the team or challenge the team or whatever. So, what does fit really mean, look like, and can you really, is it truly just a gut call?
Um, it is a little bit of a gut call. I believe in trusting my gut for the most part. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. You don't want everybody to be a clone. If everybody is exactly the same, you're right. We won't grow. There will be no challenge, right? So that's why we welcome debate. we welcome opinions. Everybody from the brand new lowest level, machinist or assembler all the way up to my VP can walk into my office and challenge me and say, why are we doing things this way? And we want
Hmm.
that. What we want, though, is those core tenant values, though, to be important to everybody. We want everybody, like I said, you know, ethics, one is our sense of urgency, inclusion, respectfulness, innovation, all of those values. We want people to hold those values true, but they can hold them true in their own unique way.
Hmm.
We have extroverts, we have introverts, we have people who are very sociable, we have people who are not quite sociable. That's all good and that's all great. But as long as we're all rowing the same direction, that's what's important. So I liken it to to a marriage, right? I might enjoy mountain biking and my wife might enjoy skiing. She's not going to make me, if I hate skiing, she's not going to make me go skiing all the time. And I'm not going to make her go mountain biking all the time. But, occasionally we indulge each other's, hobbies. But the point is, we're both headed in the same direction. We both want to have a good relationship and we both want to be successful and we want to provide for our families and things like that. So, again, a little cliche, but it is kind of like a family in a way.
Sure.
I've always said family comes first and work comes a very close second.
Well, I want to ask you about that. You've seen on LinkedIn, I'm sure you've seen posts about, you know, some companies consider their workplace their family, and other people would say, well, if a company calls themselves a family, run away because that means they expect you to work all the time.
Yeah, right.
One of my employees calls us her work family, and that's
Hmm.
the way she views it.
Sure.
So I don't know. We feel kind of close that way, but what's your feeling on that debate?
Um, I think it was the CEO of Shopify, I believe, that put out a memo about that, saying that we're not a family, right? We're a workplace. But if you really dig down deep into his message, I think what it said is that we can be like a family. We can be respectful. All those values that you hold important to your family, right? Well, some families, maybe some families aren't very respectful. I've seen a few of those, but you want to be respectful. You want to take care of each other. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it is first and foremost, it is a business, and part of that is sometimes you have to make some difficult decisions. Some decisions that if it were truly a family, maybe ones you wouldn't make. So I think his message there was, you know, we need to make sure that we are running a business, but at the same time, we can also make sure that we are treating each other with respect and that we are all trying to help each other be the best that we can be. Um, you know, I think it's a mixture of the two. I
Yeah,
don't think saying it is a family or not a family is the right answer. I think
sure.
it's somewhere in between because I mean I've had employees for 10 to 15 years that I mean they truly become very very close friends at that
Right.
point, right? And that's just inevitable. That's going to happen in any business.
Sure. Well, and then one of my favorite words is essence. Like it's like that which is important, what can't be seen. So words like you said earlier, there's a lot of cliche and talk about culture. Everybody says essentially the same thing, but culture, family, they're all words. So what does it really mean, and what does it feel like? How do people feel about your workplace? And then even trying to describe that is difficult.
Yeah, it is. I think an employee's sense of worth and enjoyment in their work is probably the best barometer of that, and that's sometimes hard to judge.
Right.
We've done some engagement surveys where we ask, anonymous surveys where we ask our employees, are you happy? Do you enjoy what you do? And not very specific questions, really kind of esoteric questions of are you getting out of your job what you want to get? And it has nothing to do with pay. It has nothing to
Right.
do with benefits. It has to do
Right.
with Are you having fun? Right?
Right.
And we've always had very high scores in those areas. And I think longevity of employees, employees who are, you know, yeah, they could maybe jump ship to somewhere else and maybe make 5% more, but they don't know what the culture of that other
Mm-hmm.
company's like, but they know what the culture here is. So employees that are not always chasing a dollar, and then trust me, money is important. It's very important. It's what makes the world go around. We all have to provide for our families.
Sure.
Uh, but at the same time, it's not the end all and be all.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you, so you've always had good tenure. That survey that you mentioned, was that by chance the Gallup 12 survey?
It was not, but I'm familiar with that one. So it was similar in a way.
Yeah.
I honestly I cannot
Yeah.
recall the exact name of it, but it was similar in that way. It measured satisfaction,
Yeah,
right?
I love that Gallup 12 survey. It's the 12 questions. One of them is like, do I have a best friend at work?
Yes, right,
Does my boss care about me as a human being?
right,
Things like that.
exactly.
And
Yes, exactly.
their
Yeah,
proof was that companies that score high on the, emotional scale are more profitable, for sure.
hmm exactly,
For sure.
exactly. That is it's a total byproduct of having a great culture. I mean, you could have a juggernaut of a company that's making tremendous amounts of money, but I've also seen companies like that where you look at the engineering drawings and you don't see the same initials more than a few times on all the drawings, and you're like, how many engineers have been through this place?
Uh-huh.
You never get any momentum there. Now they're successful on paper, but are they really successful as a company? And I
Yeah.
would argue that they're not necessarily successful as a company.
Yeah. I saw a Harvard professor do it was a VHS tape. That's how long ago it was. I saw this video, but he just said, profits come from long-term happy customers, and long-term happy customers come from long-term happy employees. That's a pretty simple equation. But with that in
It
mind,
is.
I'll ask you a question. You'll see people just say, hey, look, the world of work today, you can't expect somebody to work at a job for more than 2 or 3 years and they're going to go off and do something else. And there's companies that say, hey, look, if you're ever not, I don't expect you to work here for a long time. While you're here, give it your best. When you
Mm-hmm.
stop growing or learning, if it's time to move on, I'll support you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my dad worked for Johnson & Johnson for 35 years, and back then the expectation, you went to work for somebody and that's where you worked.
Right.
And
Right.
but now the expectation, so 30 years, 25, 20, 15, 10, you're going to change jobs every week. So when does it
Mm-hmm.
stop and go back the other way? So when you hire somebody, how long do you expect that they're going to work for you?
Um, I mean, ideally, I'd love for them to work for me for as long as they want to work for me, and as long as they are still growing as a person and are still enjoying what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my VP of operations back at R&D joined us. He's 15 years in now, so he was employee number one. It was myself and my two partners who started the business. He was the first hire at about year two ish, three ish, and he's still with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because he enjoys what he did. And we hired him on as a design engineer, and so he's worked his way up through numerous roles throughout the company.
Mm-hmm.
My director of manufacturing, same thing. He's been with us for 10 years. Started out as an engineering intern, kind of doing all the crappy jobs the engineers really didn't want to do, and then worked his way and did some purchasing, and then helped us get
Mm-hmm.
our machine shop in order, and then worked his way up to running all of manufacturing now. So that was a path that allowed him to grow, and he's enjoying the new challenges and growth. If there's an employee who is not growing and is not enjoying it, and they want to move on and try something different, and then I wish them the best of luck. Like you
Sure.
said, I tell my employees, I don't expect you to work here your entire life. If you're happy working here for that long, then that's great. Um, I will say that when I do look at resumes, if I see a history of, and it's a non-contract roles, right? 1 year, year and a half, 1 year, year and a half, 1 year, 1 year, year and a half. That becomes a little worrisome to me. That they could be a very good employee, but they haven't found that satisfaction,
Yeah,
perhaps somewhere. And now maybe it's a bad employer, could be.
sure.
Maybe there could be situations of change where their spouse lost a job or they had to move or something like that. There's always extenuating circumstances, but to me it's always something you need to dive into a little bit deeper as to why are you not satisfied and what are you
Sure,
looking for that would make you satisfied.
sure.
Because as you know, you put a lot of money into an employee to train them, to learn your way of doing things. And that can take a year or more sometimes. And
Yeah,
if they're going to leave after a year and a half, then you're back to square one all over again. So that's why hiring for fit, I think, is super important.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, a year and a half to start to really see the return on the investments. Like I say frequently, you can't manufacture antiques.
Right.
They take a while to develop. So
Yep.
when you started the company, was it like from scratch, clean piece of paper, or was there some little entity that you jumped into?
hmm So I worked for a company called Adlin Automation down in Bradenton, Florida. Pretty much fresh out of school. They were an automation company that had moved down from upstate New York back in the '70s, and they were doing pretty amazing stuff back in the '70s and '80s. They were using
Mm-hmm.
IBM robots and hydraulic robots, and
Uh-huh.
so for Florida, they were pretty advanced in the robotics space. Went to work for them in the robotics group. We were bought by larger and larger corporations, four corporations over about 4 or 5 year period. Finally owned by a multi-billion-dollar Swedish company. And they decided at that point I was running the engineering and manufacturing at that facility, and they decided they had too many locations all over the world. They needed to shut some of them down. Unfortunately, we drew the short straw from one of those locations. So I relocated our products all over the world, but we had this custom automation group of robotics and automation machinery that I couldn't figure out where to put, and it didn't really fit anywhere else in the organization. So I said, well, why don't you sell it to me? And I'm going to bring my two top engineers along with me. So essentially, we traded in our severance package for a customer list and a couple computers and a pat on the back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we really kind of started from zero. So we went from the largest automation company in Florida to the smallest, overnight. And that was in 2005, late four, early five. But we had really loyal customers. We had people who knew myself, Doug, and Bruce, and they trusted us.
Uh-huh.
So we started building some smaller equipment, and then it became a little bigger and a little bigger. And then the recession in '08 hit, and a lot of our competitors who were much larger had a really rough time, and most of them went bankrupt. So now there was this vacuum of people need, after 10 when the economy took back off again. There was this lack of automation companies out there. So that's really we grew steadily from 5 to 10, but from 10 and on, we just exponentially grew from that point forward.
Did probably right at the beginning, you were just immersed in the work, but at some point, you read a book or saw a seminar and said, "Hey, I should have a mission statement or a vision statement." Or how did the vision for R&D come together, and when did it come together?
So I would say it was always there, kind of in the back of my head, and just the way I led and um, the way I tried to run the company. But you're right; it was never on the wall. It was never written down anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Probably about 5 to 6 years into the company, um, we came up with a new product, a standard product that we thought could sell fairly well. So I started looking for some outside investment. And two gentlemen contacted me. They were partners in an investment firm. They were both in the manufacturing environment, had both retired a little early, and they still wanted to do some things to give back to the community. Um, so I brought them in. A 2 hour meeting turned into an 8 hour meeting. And by the end of the meeting, I said, you know what? I don't want your money. I want your knowledge. I want, you guys have done this. You've grown companies, you've sold them. You know, I want to learn both the mistakes you've made and have a sounding board. So I brought them on as kind of business coaches slash consultants, and we had it was probably about a 7 to 8 year relationship where they taught us the difference between working in the company and working on the company.
Mm-hmm.
And they encouraged me, like, Sean, you've got good people working for you that can work in the company. You need to work on the company. And that's when we came up with things like really putting our values and our mission on paper.
Mm-hmm.
We developed at one point, I don't exactly remember what year it was, but we determined that we got big enough that we were having communication problems just within the company. And that was our biggest issue, was communication. So we came up with the 10 commandments of communication. I've posted this on LinkedIn before, but just a list of rules of how you should communicate internal to the company and external to the company.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early things that I learned was, and there's a few little jokes and comics floating around on this, is I would go to one of the engineers and say, I've always thought about this idea of, like, what if we did it this way? What if we tried something like this? Like, just think about it and let me know what you think. And 3 days later, I'd have 10 CAD designs on my desk, fully drawn out and all. And I'm like, well, wait, no, I didn't want you to actually do. I just want you to think about it, right? So my engineering manager, of course, is coming to me like, Sean, what are you doing? They're I had them, on track, and now all of a sudden they're going off track. It's like you can't do that. And the phrase they used was, a whisper is a shout when it comes from leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn to go through the chain of command. So I had to go to my engineering manager and go, hey, talk to your engineers about this idea. Tell them don't draw anything. Just think about it. And I want to have a meeting to talk about these
Sure.
ideas. So by all of that coaching and all, we figured out how to become a really effective organization when it comes
Uh-huh.
to leadership. And I'm still really good friends with those two gentlemen to this day.
Yeah.
But they helped us. They helped us a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The right business coach is great. And, they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So it was just the right time for you.
It was.
And
It
I
was
would like to
perfect
see
timing.
those 10 commandments of communication, because they're probably printable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've heard that the greatest problem with communication is thinking that it has occurred.
Oh, yes. That's very true. And one of ours was, it is your responsibility to follow up.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't just, one of the commandments was, it's your responsibility to follow up. You can't just throw it over the wall and say, okay, it's not my problem anymore.
Yeah.
You've got to go back and make sure, okay, you heard me, right? When is it going to be done? That's the most important thing. Is I tell my all of my employees, the last thing in an email or a phone call or a Zoom meeting or whatever is, okay, so here's our action items, and when will you get back to me on that?
Uh-huh.
Because if you just say get back to me, it may never happen, because get back to me soon. Well, your soon is not the same as my soon.
So we had a few minutes left. I have to ask you about AMA, the podcast you're launching called Ask Me Anything. I'm curious if you have
Yes.
a vision for that. That's one question. The other question is, what would you really like people to ask you about?
So it's an idea I've had for a while. We had a little video cast at R&D called Uptime, but it was a little bit different. It was more just grabbing people at trade shows, sitting them down on the couch, talking to them for 30, 45 seconds, just little quick snippets. And it was just more, quite honestly, it was just a more fun, we just want to do it for fun. We just want to
Sure.
have some fun and talk to our peers and all. But this is something that I get asked I get asked the same questions from a lot of business owners, people who are trying to start automation companies, from even just manufacturers. Things like, how do you deal with a customer that's demanding net 180 terms, or how do you quote accurately, and how do you do these things? How do we determine what we need to automate? And I get asked these questions over and over again, and I'm a believer that in our space, there's not a lot of really, really true competitors. I mean, yes, there's companies where we overlap in that Venn diagram of what we do, but and there are some that are just direct competitors. But an automation company in Florida that does medical device is really not a competitor with an automation company in California that does welding. We're not. We have a lot of things in common, and we could all share best practices. So, I decided, a couple things. One, that AMA comes from the website Reddit. They've always had this thing called AMA, Ask Me Anything. So somebody with a special set of skills or a unique job will post, and people will ask questions, and they'll answer. So I decided that it'd be good to share some of my experience with the community. We're not going to give away all the secret sauce, but you can share ideas and concepts. And two is just to kind of give back to an industry that, quite honestly, has given me a very successful, 28-year career now. So I just decided that, hey, I've solicited some questions on LinkedIn and all. I've got 5 or 6 already. I'm just going to turn it into something that's just kind of fun and give my opinion on it. Maybe it'll spur some conversations. Um, you know, what do I want people to ask? I want them to ask what's important to them. What do they want to know about the automation industry that either they don't know, or perhaps they have an opinion, but they want to see, is there a differing opinion out there? So, everything from technology to the financial side of running an automation business to marketing. Having run this company for 18 years, I've worn a lot of hats, and I'm not a CPA, and I don't have a degree in marketing, but I've done enough of all of that to
Right.
know, I know enough to be dangerous, right? And I've never been afraid to share my opinions.
Well,
So I think it'll be fun.
you said ask you anything, so I have a question. The
Okay.
pictures from the Webb, the new telescope of that nebula, that it's about this big, but that represents 600 million light years. Could you explain that to me?
Yes. um, I will go get Neil deGrasse Tyson. Give me a moment, and he will come. He will come over and
Sure,
explain that.
sure.
Um, yeah, those that James Webb telescope is absolutely amazing.
It is.
I've been watching a lot of those images.
Sure.
I have to clarify that it is called Automation AMA, so I might need to narrow the scope of those a
Oh,
little
I
bit.
didn't. Okay, I didn't see it. You have to make your screen a little bit bigger there.
Well, I'm not as I don't have a beautiful studio yet like you do. Maybe if this takes off, I'll spend a little bit more money on it. But I'm kind of making do with. I've been in the office for 18 years. I haven't been in a home office, so I'm kind of making do with a home office right now.
Well, there's a couple of things notable about this. This is the first time in the history of the universe that two novice podcasters went at it for their debut. So that's never happened before. But I do have a vision is that someday we'll be on competing networks on late night TV. That's probably where this
Oh,
is
there we
going.
go.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, we'll have to watch the ratings and see who
Okay.
who does better.
Well, anyway, this has been fun. We could probably go another session. Maybe we'll get back together again and talk about automation, life, and other things. But Sean, it's been great. Thank you for joining me and spending part of your day with us.
Yeah, hey, Gary, I really appreciate it. I've always had a lot of respect for your organization, and thank you for having me on. It's been a
All
lot of
right.
fun.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So thanks everybody for joining us on Hired the podcast with Sean Dotson. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you listen in wherever you listen to your podcasts and follow us or check out Miller Resource Group YouTube channel. Follow us on LinkedIn. More content to come. And if you're interested in being part of our experience, feel free to let us know. Have a great day.